5. Repercussions of Default. Eve's disillusionment was truly pathetic. Adam discerned the whole predicament and, while heartbroken and dejected, entertained only pity and sympathy for his erring mate. It was in the despair of the realization of failure that Adam, the day after Eve's misstep, sought out Leota, the brilliant Nodite woman who was head of the Western schools of the garden, and with premeditation committed the folly of Eve. But do not misunderstand, Adam was not beguiled. He knew exactly what he was about. He deliberately chose to share the fate of Eve. He loved his mate with a supermortal affection, and the thought of the possibility of a lonely vigil on Urantia without her was more than he could endure. When they learned what had happened to Eve, the infuriated inhabitants of the garden became unmanageable. They declared war on the nearby Nodite settlement. They swept out through the gates of Eden and down upon these unprepared people, utterly destroying them. Not a man, woman, or child was spared. And Cano, the father of Cain yet unborn, also perished. Upon the realization of what had happened, Sarapatecia was overcome with consternation and beside himself with fear and remorse. The next day he drowned himself in the great river. The children of Adam sought to comfort their distracted mother while their father wandered in solitude for 30 days. At the end of that time, judgment asserted itself, and Adam returned to his home and began to plan for their future course of action. The consequences of the follies of misguided parents are so often shared by their innocent children. The upright and noble sons and daughters of Adam and Eve were overwhelmed by the inexplicable sorrow of the unbelievable tragedy which had been so suddenly and so ruthlessly thrust upon them. Not in 50 years did the older of these children recover from the sorrow and sadness of those tragic days, especially the terror of that period of 30 days during which their father was absent from the home, while their distracted mother was in complete ignorance of his whereabouts or fate. And those same 30 days were as long years of sorrow and suffering to Eve. Never did this noble soul fully recover from the effects of that excruciating period of mental suffering and spiritual sorrow. No feature of their subsequent deprivations and material hardships ever began to compare in Eve's memory with those terrible days and awful nights of loneliness and unbearable uncertainty. She learned of the rash act of Sarapatecia, and did not know whether her mate had in sorrow destroyed himself, or had been removed from the world in retribution for her misstep. And when Adam returned, Eve experienced a satisfaction of joy and gratitude that never was effaced by their long and difficult life partnership of toiling service. Time passed, but Adam was not certain of the nature of their offense until 70 days after the default of Eve, when the Melchizedek receivers returned to Urantia and assumed jurisdiction over world affairs. And then he knew they had failed. But still more trouble was brewing. The news of the annihilation of the Nodite settlement near Eden was not slow in reaching the home tribes of Sarapatecia to the north, and presently a great host was assembling to march on the garden. And this was the beginning of a long and bitter warfare between the Adamites and the Nodites, for these hostilities kept up long after Adam and his followers emigrated to the second garden in the Euphrates Valley. There was intense and lasting enmity between that man and the woman, between his seed and her seed.